Hi, Steven. How are you?
Hey,
Uh,
Kathleen, we're going to talk about hiring, right?
we are going to talk about hiring, and we're going to talk about a lot of the questions that we have been receiving from the community today, because data science is a hot potato indeed.
You know, I'm just going through a process of interviewing some interns for data scientist positions at TIBCO right now. And, you know, I've mentored university students and I've hired a lot of data scientists over the years, and everybody asks the same questions. So I think we can go through a lot of those, you know, how do you get started and what do I need to learn? And
Right.
also from the point of view of a hiring manager, right? It's difficult to find data scientists. So
It is. They are called the unicorns for a reason, right? So let's talk about that. So let's talk about from the being a data science perspective first, right? I am a data scientist, or I consider myself a data scientist, and I'm looking for a job. So how do I get a job? What would you say?
yeah, I think it can be difficult to know how to start out. As I said, I'm talking to interns, right? And the first thing I always look for on a resume is whether you have experience.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, if you are coming out of university, at some point in your career, you're not going to have any experience, right?
Right.
You've always got to sort of know
The
how
chicken and the egg.
Right, the chicken and the egg thing, exactly.
Yeah.
So the advice that I give to university students is, you know, don't rely on just the classes that you've taken and the projects that you do as part of those classes, right? I always see on resumes, you know, class projects, and it's fine, list them, but everybody's kind of got those. They're often the same. I mean, from the same school, you literally have the same projects. So don't emphasize those. You really want to have some sort of real world experience. If you don't have an, you know, obviously the first thing to do is to try and get an internship, but chicken and egg, what happens if you don't have one? I think just self-motivated projects using like public data or something that's exciting to you, right? One of our interns a couple of years ago, he's really interested in sports. And so he did a project where he was using machine learning models to look at the sort of the patterns of scores and wins and losses in the baseball season, going back through the entire history of baseball through the 19th century. It was really fascinating, something that he was really excited about. There's plenty of data around that, and he came up with some pretty interesting results. So also, like there are lots of nonprofits out there or little businesses, right, who have a bunch of data, and they'd love somebody to volunteer and say, hey, I'll, you know, give me your data and I'll see what I can find. Or maybe you have a particular problem you're solving. So, or you can look on the TIBCO blog, right? We do a bunch of sort of not-for-profit projects or just sort of like research R&D type stuff. Take those data sets and come up with your own version of it. Try and do better than we did, right? So if you can list self-motivated projects like that on your resume, I think that's one way to sort of have something on your resume that will appeal to a hiring manager like me.
I will totally support that. The only thing that I will add is ensure that whatever you put your hands on, you are passionate about it, you understand about the topic, you have some background about the topic, so it's easier for you to go through the data and to actually make something out of it that is way more fulfilling, so you can actually ensure you have fun in the meantime.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So if you are early in your career, you are starting, right? I think a great way to break into the field is hands-on, right? But what kind of experience do you actually need to break into the field?
I think you really need to have some sort of statistical and sort of machine learning knowledge.
Yes.
That's sort of just ground level. But you know, I frequently do interview people, especially early in their careers, who often have sort of gaps, especially around statistics. They may have some of the core machine learning models, but maybe they haven't done anything around unstructured data, or deep learning is very popular right now. So you should have touched on that. So, you know, it's a very broad field, but there are some core techniques and methods that people should be familiar with around classification, regression, clustering, dimensionality reduction, text analytics, time series, and then sort of basic statistical skills, probability distribution functions, statistical tests, that sort of thing. So, you know, those are sort of ground level. If you're not taking those at universities, there are plenty of online courses you can do to get familiar with those. And as I said, you know, getting some real world hands-on experience, public data, not-for-profits, as you said, right, finding passion projects and applying machine learning to those is a great thing to have.
Right. By the way, let me
yeah.
introduce you to Dr. Data Science. Let's talk about Dr. Data Science as well, because I think it's key, and how we can actually help the creation of these basic concepts as well. It's not only the tool, is what are you going to do with it and why, right? So what is this Dr. Data Sciences? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is this monthly program. We actually have two. There's Dr. Data Science, which you mentioned. There's also Dr. Spotfire, which is more focused on visualization, charts, exploration, data wrangling, and so on. We do look at the world of data science in those two monthly webinars through the lens of TIBCO products, but really they're pretty general. Dr. Data Science, we just take a couple of standard techniques every month, and we get one of our data scientists at TIBCO to talk about those. So I would encourage people to find those on YouTube, and you can go back and look at the history of those. We've covered everything from neural networks to time series to categorical encodings. We even had one session on how to become a data scientist. So I would definitely encourage people to tune into that. And again, I've mentioned Coursera. There are lots of sort of boot camps and MOOCs as well that people can take to learn about data science. There's no shortage of often free resources that are just out there.
Right. It's a very different world comparing with what we had a decade ago or so. But even I am an engineer by trade, and I will say it's never enough. Continuously, you have to continuously, chart this out and see. Maybe you forgot about some techniques and so. So I have been checking these Dr. Data science sessions, and I can say that in every single session, I learned at least one new thing, which is phenomenal.
Well, so you came from engineering background, also an academic background, right? I mean, how did you get into data science?
Yeah, so I think the hands-on, right? The mandatory, they gave me a computer at Texas Instruments, and Spotfire was installed in the computer, and that was the beginning of it, right? Like, okay, now you really need to optimize the production of yield. And behind the scenes, the production of yield was over 10,000 steps that need to happen for you to actually have a silicon wafer and to have an actual functional die or circuitry, right? So semiconductors is the source, or one of the biggest sources of big data, right? If we want to talk about semiconductors, we know for sure big data is involved. And I was part of the yield team, so I was doing data science stuff 15 years ago, before it was even called data science, right? So my goal was to ingest all these silos of data coming from the different stages that you have when you are creating a silicon wafer. So multi-probe stage, and then final test stage, and then pre-burn-in versus post-burn-in, and all of that. So that's how I got into data science. And then locally, I have been involved in multiple projects that are not only within semiconductors, which is also a beautiful experience, because data is data, and everybody's trying to do the same, right? Which is optimal something. We're going to optimize ABC, maximizing or minimizing. But at the end, you are trying to accomplish that same thing. So that has actually allowed me to grow into some other verticals and better understand the power of what data science can do when it's very well applied.
Yeah, there's two important points there, right? So a lot of these techniques absolutely transfer from one vertical to another. You can also go deep within a particular vertical where, I've also been working with you in the worlds of energy a little bit, but then also high-tech manufacturing, like you mentioned. I've learned so much in this, and like time series methods and big data methods, wide data is something that's very common in that industry. I've learned a lot about those, but you can then apply them to areas like retail analytics, also genomic analyses. But your other point about coming from a different technical field and then moving into data science, that's a great entry point, is that within your own organization now, often there are data science jobs, and as an engineer, as a developer, as an IT person, you can often make that sort of lateral shift, leveraging the technical capabilities you already have in this parallel discipline.
Right, right. And now that we're talking about technical capabilities and technical skills, because I think that is changing all the time, but at the same with semi-structure. I mean, today we're talking about Python, tomorrow it can be Julia, next Carolina, I mean, whatever. But at the end, it has to be some glue into what needs to happen for all of these data to provide the insights that are needed for the business, right? And apply data science in a successful way to actually help all of these businesses. So what about technical skills? What else is happening today that needs to be part of that resume?
Well, you already mentioned Python, and I think that's the obvious thing to mention. R is still current, but I think if you had to make a bet on the one language to learn for a data scientist, it would be Python. It would be Python. There are just so many libraries and capabilities and extensions and frameworks that are attached to the Python banner that's, I think, the place to start. Although actually, to be honest, I think it's true that probably the most frequently used language by data scientists around the world is SQL still. So nothing new there, but it is the language of data. It's very important to know. And you can often do almost all of your analysis just by writing really good SQL. It scales really well. It's fairly straightforward to do. It's easy to manipulate data in many different locations, whether it's a relational database or sort of Hadoop and Spark and so on. There's always some sort of SQL interface. So SQL and Python, we mentioned big data. I think PySpark is one of those sort of elements of the Python world that is worth learning as well for getting into bigger data. Those are really the languages that I think you would focus on, as well as I said, in terms of technical skills, college level class in statistics, and then some sort of online class or college class on common machine learning methods. The Andrew Ng class on Coursera is sort of famous, pretty good place to start.
Right. And a lot of platforms out there that are available, even for the phone. It's kind of ridiculous the amount of things that are right now.
Definitely deep learning is a little bit of a gap in my knowledge from the last few years. And so I myself have just been learning from YouTube videos, and I'll be, taking a bus ride and I'm just like got my buds plugged in and I'm listening to these great classes on deep learning with hands-on examples that you can try in Python and so on. I mean, it's so easy to learn new stuff now.
It is phenomenal. Okay, so we talked about finding a job and growing into the data science career and so on, but we also get a lot of the questions from the other side, which are...
Well, Catalina, though, just before we move on, right, because I feel like I haven't touched on one thing, which is how do you actually go out and find that job, right? Before we shift the perspective, because I do think that's worth talking about. Probably the most common question I have from students that I've mentored at university is, I can apply to job boards, but sometimes it feels like you're just throwing your resume into a black hole. Are there other ways of going out and finding a job? And it is difficult. I think the first thing to try, if you possibly can, is to leverage your network, right? I know you and I have both had experience of this personally, and then through the data science team here at TIBCO, we've often found people through the network. Go on LinkedIn and find the jobs that appeal to you, right? You don't have to settle. There are plenty of data science jobs. Find the jobs that really appeal to you in companies that you think are doing good work, and find a way to connect to them through your network, maybe some second level connection. If you don't have that connection, find something that team is working on. There's often public webinars or blogs or some sort of public media about their work, even if it's just on their website. Find some connection, something that appeals to you, something that you've done before, and write to them. Through LinkedIn, find emails. Emails are often easy to find. They're attached to presentations, or they're there on LinkedIn or whatever, or they're there in a white paper or some academic paper, and write to them and just say, hey, I saw your blog on X. I've also done some work on that. I'm really fascinated with that. I notice you have open positions in this. Is there a way that I can talk? Try and sort of create that personal connection. And then recruiting fairs, of course, are important. Even if you're not at school anymore, often as an alumnus, you can go back to your university. Meetups are a great place to meet people at organizations that you're a fan of. So I think those are the things that I would try, is leveraging your network and going to these events.
And try to be one step ahead of what you think is happening for the rest. So sometimes you are already doing the job that you want to apply for, kind of thing. So it's kind of be one step ahead there, and whatever you can show into your skills connecting dots into that end goal in mind, it will put you in a different
It's a really
position.
good point. I mean, this is true for you, right? I mean, originally at TIBCO, you were in sales and then made this move over to data science, which has been great for TIBCO and great for you. We've got other people on the data science team who have had a different focus, coming from, say, customer success, coming from sales organization, coming from engineering, who have moved into the data science team because they've already got those skills. I mean, again, that sort of lateral move, or just expanding your role and starting to do that where you are before you even make that role, just like doing more data science work within your own job description. I think that's a really important lesson.
Exactly. And then let's talk about the transition, because that's part of it. So then you grow on it, and then you are actually the analyst that was putting together a lot of the original digital transformation steps at the beginning of the journey. And then now you are in a point where you are hiring for data science, right?
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes a completely different problem. Like, okay, how do I hire my data science team?
Yeah.
So you have a lot of experience in that. What can we share with this community?
Yeah, I think, I've hired a good many data scientists and over the years, and super proud of the people that I've hired as well, gone on to do great things. It's like easily the most satisfying part of my job, but finding them, my goodness me, it's difficult. You know, there are a lot more data scientists now than there used to be. Schools are creating these master's programs. Berkeley has a great one. UNC has always had a great one. Northwestern. There are these great programs out there. So the supply is greater, but the demand is so high. And of course, it's very easy. You know, I'm working a lot of startups. It's very easy to get beaten down by the recruiting machines at Google and Facebook and LinkedIn and so on. So I've had to sort of come up with sort of like guerrilla methods of sourcing candidates, certainly using my own network, right? And sort of the flip side of what I was just saying, reach out to connections of mine and just finding great people on LinkedIn, just spending a lot of time searching for people who seem to have the right profile, and then by hook or by crook saying, we are going to hire that person, even if it takes me a year, 2 years, and persuading them and making appeals to them based on the work that you think would be a good fit for them. So leveraging your network in that way. I've already mentioned school recruiting fairs. Always go to those, right? They're a great way to find good candidates. They'll often get flooded themselves with the big recruiting companies, the big Silicon Valley companies, the big data science companies. But even as a smaller company, you can still have a presence at those recruiting fairs. And also, you know, universities have a lot of public seminars, online and in person. And going along to those, right? And sort of tracking down students who seem engaged and are asking good questions. I mentioned meetups. As a recruiter, recruiting engineer, as a recruiting manager, I often will go to meetups and just talk to people afterwards, find people who, one of the best engineers I've ever worked with, my previous company, she came along to a meetup that we held, actually, and she asked a bunch of questions. She didn't have any data science background, barely had an engineering background, but I could just tell she was incredibly smart and got on with my team, and there was this great rapport. We hired her almost on the spot, and as I say, she turned into one of the best engineers I've ever worked with. Meetups, great way of meeting people. Companies can hold social events, right? At my startup, we used to just hold a social event in a bar or in a cafe. We'd hand out flyers on the train. We'd spread the word through our social networks. So holding social events like that can be a great way of appealing to people. Maybe the one other thing I'd mention, which we found very useful, is really hard work, but we would get the whole team together. We'd find people on LinkedIn that we thought were a good fit. And then we would write individually crafted notes to them and say, hey, Jenny, I saw the work that you did at, you know, Facebook on this particular thing, or I noticed that you've got skills with Spark, or I noticed that you've got a particular interest in deep learning. We're doing projects like that at my company, and this is what we're doing, and you can read about them here. You know, I'm the founder of the company, or I'm a manager, or I work in this team, you know, have that sort of personal angle. And we would just write these, we'd go out and we'd search for these people, which is hard enough, and then write these personal messages, which is hard enough. So it takes a lot of effort, but that had a pretty good hit rate.
Right.
in terms of reaching out to people.
Yeah, targeting your end goal in mind and going for it. That's a good one. I will also add to that, when you're building a team, especially in data science team, diversity is important as well. For me, yes, you need a set of skills, but also hire the human, and not only the resume, right? Especially when it's somebody that is building algorithms that are going to be, filter point for an admission process, or things like that can have actually consequences.
Yes, that's
so
right. People come from different backgrounds and have different sensitivities, and what you mentioned, which is having sensitivities in terms of the impact of your models on society, is hugely important. And so they're hiring people who are going to have those sensitivities is important, but also it gives your team better business acumen if you have people approaching problems in different ways. So that level of diversity shouldn't just be a corporate policy that you adhere to, although that's a good thing to do as well. It's something that just makes your job more fun and makes you more effective as a data science team. I totally agree.
Yeah. Now you haven't really mentioned recruiters, so let's talk about that.
Look, I've definitely used recruiters before, and they're an important part of the hiring process. I find, though, it's frankly often not much more different than just putting an ad out on Craigslist or LinkedIn, and you just get a great sort of unwashed bunch of resumes coming in, and
that is going to cost you a lot of money too.
It costs a lot more money than making an ad on Craigslist. A really good recruiter will have an address book. They'll have a database of candidates. They will have knowledge of the industry that they're hiring into. So if you can find a recruiter like that, who is not just putting an ad out and then applying some sort of modest filter to the incoming messages, but actually has a network and has an address book and has some awareness of the industry, recruiters like that are worth their weight in gold, but they can be difficult to find.
Yeah, I know. What about the interview process? I think that's also key.
Yes, right. The interview process is, first of all, it's part of the recruiting process, in the sense that it's how you can attract people to your company if you do it well. And of course, it should also hopefully filter out people who are not going to be a great fit. So bear those things in mind, right? Bear in mind that this should really be a good filter for who can do the job. And it should also attract good candidates. Those seem like obvious things to say, but I think we often forget them. So in terms of attracting people to the job, make the interview fun, make it friendly, make people relaxed. Often the very best people are not good at doing interviews. A few jobs ago, one of my engineers recommended her friend, who she knew was a great software engineer, and would be a good fit for our company. I brought her in for an interview. She met several other members of the team. They asked those standard sort of whiteboard questions, and there's some sort of puzzle quiz type thing, sort of Microsoft-y type questions. This engineer did not do great. She just was kind of failed the interview, frankly. And the engineer on my team who had recommended her told me, like, look, she's good, she's great, trust me, I think she'd make a great fit for our team. I brought her back for a second interview. I got to know her a little bit better. I actually did more of a sort of collaborative style interview. It's just like, let's program something together. Like, here's something I'm working on right now. Even then, she didn't do great on the interview, but I could tell, first of all, I was just going to trust my engineer's recommendation, right? We brought her on, and of course, she was amazing, right? A very, very strong engineer. So the interview process can be intimidating and difficult and not well suited for filtering people. So make it fun, make it relaxing, making it well suited for that person, and get at the thing they're going to be doing on the job. You shouldn't be asking them questions about linked lists. Why do people always ask interview questions about linked list or random obscure topics if that's not what they're going to be doing on the job, right? So give them some work that you're currently working on.
Right.
One of the best interview techniques I've seen was used by a group, Pivotal Labs in San Francisco. Is still a software sort of outsourcing organization. They hire engineers like by the dozens. It's crazy. And I went through their interview process. Actually, I asked them to put me through the interview process just for fun. And a big part of it was just sitting down with the hiring manager and pair programming on a problem
Mm-hmm.
in Java or Python. And seeing how well you collaborated, right? So you weren't put on the spot and told to do something on a whiteboard and said, solve this problem. You collaborated with somebody and they could see how you interacted. Did you respond to ideas? Did you have your own ideas?
Right.
Did you take criticism well? I think specifically what I would say is make the interview challenging, but not artificially so, right?
Yep.
Because really good people like to be challenged. They like to feel like, well, I passed a test. I feel good about this, right? I feel like they value my skills, right?
Yep. Yep.
Don't make it artificial. Make it real world examples. And a couple of other things. First of all, make it consistent, right?
Right.
So many interviewers I see or have experience or are on my team will try to think of a different question every day for fun, right? It keeps it entertaining for them. Well, it's more interesting for you, but you need to ask the same questions of every candidate so you can compare one to the other, right? It's amazing how people stick to that sort of a basic rule.
That's true. The only thing that I will add is consider a question with an open mind. And my only suggestion there is don't make a fish climb a tree, right? Because it happens, especially with diversity and diverse cultures and second languages and things like that. I've been there, but it's just keep the bigger picture and big perspective, but everything else.
I totally agree with that, especially in these days where we're doing more phone screens and video interviews, right? You're really focusing on, here is a question, now answer that directly to me, and we've got half an hour, right? And there's no other distractions. You're not going to pop out to go and get a cup of tea or whatever. It's just very sort of intense, right? So if English isn't your first language, for example, or if you're just not comfortable with the interview process, or if the person that you're speaking to is maybe a little intimidating because they're senior or they know this subject really well, it creates this sort of artificial situation. So I think, it's this mixture between absolutely, I think you need to be consistent, as I said, but you also need to tailor the interview to the person that you're talking to and allow them to, one thing I haven't mentioned, right, is an old friend and boss of mine from a few jobs ago had this very simple interview technique, which is he would pick one thing on your resume and he would actually say, can you tell me about an interesting project? Or tell me, like, these three things seem relevant to what we're doing here at this company. Which one are you most comfortable talking about, right? So you give them the opportunity and then would just drill into that and just ask again and again, like ask them about something and then ask them about that and sort of find out where do you bottom out in terms of experience, right? And everybody bottoms out at a certain point, but by starting with something that you're comfortable with and really drilling into that, I think that's another good interview technique.
I like that one. Yeah, I like that one. Okay, so we have been. It seems still complex. I mean, there is still a lot out there that we understand is sometimes a little overwhelming. So I think also the message is you are not alone, and we can help you out. So how can the team can help on this?
Yeah, I think you're right. It is complex and intimidating, and it can definitely feel like, oh, I'm just leaving school, or I'm changing career midway, or I'm getting towards the end of my career and trying to do something new. You can feel alone, but in fact, data science especially is such a new field that I think everybody feels like that in some ways, right?
Yep.
In terms of how the team, like, so, we have a large data science team here at TIBCO, and I definitely sort of delegate the interview process to my team. I have them run interviews themselves, of course, and we also do a data challenge. So we'll give a candidate a data set and have them come in and do a presentation around that, because that's a big part of the job as well. And it also gives time for somebody to go off and do their best work and then come back and present it. And so having the team all sort of sit into that process and interview the candidate and see them present, the most important thing I want from the team is just their feedback. And I will always make a point of getting the team together at the end of the interview process and saying, okay, what do we all think? And often, certainly I have people send me their notes, right? This is what happened during the interview. But I like to get everybody together, because often what you find is that somebody will have just picked on some small thing, and then you suddenly realize like everybody noticed that as well. And it turns into not such a small thing, right? Maybe in a positive or negative way. something you might not have thought to mention turned out to have been a common theme across the whole interview. So that sort of collaborative, sort of communal approach to interviewing. I also think once you've made an offer, right, if you found somebody who's really great, you know, you need to come up with a good offer, make sure that you actually get this person on board that you fell in love with during the interview process, give them the details of what they're going to be working on, get them excited about the job. But I will often get my team, especially if this is a really strong candidate that we're intent on hiring, I will get my team to write to them to try and engage with them around projects that they might be working on, right? So I'll say, hey, Nico, tell them about this, you know, high-tech manufacturing project that we're working on right now, because they'll probably work on that too, and tell them what they'll be working on and get them sort of brought into the fold, right?
Yeah. It's not just me, it's the team welcoming you, and that makes a difference.
Yeah, you're not going to be working by yourself, you're working as part of a team.
Exactly. Okay. Well, I think this has been great. I think we cover main points that I think are key and highlighting how to get engaged with this community, and good questions, good follow-up. Anything else you want to add?
Oh, I would just say that, you know, we're just talking about team, and, you know, you and I work together on the data science team at TUCO, which is a great pleasure. It's a lot of fun working together. And to me, that is part of the appeal of being part of a data science team, is that maybe a little bit unlike sort of engineering fields, where often it's, you know, you're part of a team and you are collaborating, maybe you even do pair programming, but for a lot of engineers, you're mostly heads down, staring at code. Data science is a very collaborative activity, and that's what makes it a lot of fun. And I'm glad you brought up some of those team aspects, because that to me is sort of a hallmark of being a data scientist.
It is. It makes a difference, and it's a very proud feeling, and embracing it is very satisfying. So yeah, very, very cool. Well, thank you, Steven, for your time.
Thanks. That was fun to chat about this.
Fun to chat about it. Yeah.